Is Conversations for Men That Women Need to Hear. I'm Angeline Longshore with Zelis Daniel. Hey, Zelis.
How you doing?
Good. So we're talking today about what's on our minds, stress. We're in crisis. And we're just going to have, like a conversation here about what's going on with me, what's going on with you, and maybe some things that I've come to realize and probably things that you've come to realize. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good all in all, working our way through this little separation transition and trying to get having more time with my kids here. Getting 3 days and 3 nights was nice. Going through a separation and trading the kids back and forth has a lot of change for the kids. So I think that an extra day made the transition for them a little better. Yeah. We're right in the middle of this COVID quarantine pandemic, and there's a lot of data showing our stay at home is working, which creates this well, if our numbers are low, then why we need to get back to work, I think a lot of us, everybody out there is just I can sit in my hands for so long before, I'm starting to get a little anxious about where my next paycheck's coming from. So
yeah,
definitely a real issue for everyone.
I think we're all really concerned, not about just our health, but about where the money's coming from. And I'm starting to feel that a little panic feeling, okay, this is, in your mind you think, okay, this is going to be over at a certain point, and the stay-at-home thing, they gave a certain date, so you can hang on for a little bit, and then it's oh, it's extended. Oh, we really can't do the things that we were going to do. All those things that you sort of had that foresight of at that first time when they said that it was going to be stay at home, where you're okay, I can do that, and then this will happen. Well, those thoughts and plans are not able to happen. It's a different world, and I think we're realizing that. For me, it's like a Groundhog Day feeling where you wake up every day, you kind of go through this oh yeah, that's right, we're in this situation. Oh no, the money's not there. Oh yeah, I need to do something. So there's the stress. And I was just listening to a podcast, which sometimes when I'm in these situations, I go to my resources of where can I find some positivity or some answers or tools. And so it was really helpful because I realized that I was in my head kind of spinning the same story, because we often do that when we're in crisis, and your adrenaline kind of keeps you there. So when I listened to the podcast, I was oh, there's actually these stress strategies that they talked about. And so I don't know, I thought maybe I'd share that and then share what I've been doing, with these thoughts.
Yeah, please.
So there's an antidote, we're in this disease mindset. So there's this antidote. They say, see it, own it, and use it. And the thing is, we do see it, but we have to really, really take it in. Because sometimes people, they just either shut down, ignore it, oh, that they pity it, not pity it. What is it called? Where you poo-poo it. You're yeah, right. Oh, this is all fake. It's a hoax. All those things you've been hearing about. Then there's other people who anesthetize. So they're not really taking it in, and then but really seeing it is going, okay, here's the reality. I'm just going to look at it full on. This is bad. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of days. I'm feeling okay, this is no money,
Yeah. You start to come to that there's no more light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know how far it is.
Yeah. So then okay, then once you see it, it's okay, I get it. I'm fully aware now. Now I'm going to own it. okay, yes, this is true. I'm not going to like say, yeah, things are going to just come back. I'm going to own it. Like, okay, this is a part of life. This is a part of everyday life now, and accept it. That's where I got to yesterday. Like, okay, this is a part of life. This is how it's going to be. This is a new world. And then the third one is to use it. Okay, how am I going to take this world now and do what I can right now? So I decided to do these virtual haircuts, where you go on with somebody on Zoom and you walk them through. Because I used to do hair a long time ago, like when I was in my 20s, but I'm actually really good at teaching and really good on Zoom because I've worked with clients in helping them brand their businesses over Zoom. So I know the technology. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to use this for the situation right now. I'm helping people. I'm able to feel empowered in some way to make some money. Even though it's not the same amount, it's some. So that's where I am right now with this like crisis stress management. And, they say that during this adrenaline phase, you're super focused and you're super energized. That's what happens when you're like forced with the tiger who's coming at you. So instead of running away from the tiger, like use that focus and energy on something where, I guess the thing is when we're forced to certain situations, we actually can innovate and create. Because if you really own it, then you can use it. So that's where I am with, I'm gonna use this situation to help people and to help myself and my family, and not ignore where we are. So that's what I learned from this podcast. And I'm like, okay, thank you. I'm so glad there's these things out there that I can read. The story is from Thomas and Aaliyah Crum. An article is on Harvard Business Review about facing Mount Everest. Like this kind of situation is like a Mount Everest situation. Like you're in it, you're enduring it, you have to climb it, and there's certain realities you have to face. So yeah.
It makes me think about this analogy my dad just shared with me the other day, talking about how things are kind of rough, and it's like he said he stumbled across this quote that said, if the mountain was smooth, then you couldn't climb it. And it's just such, like that reference of like this climbing Mount Everest. If it was just a vertical sheet of glass, smooth, you wouldn't be able to get up it, So it's like we have to have these rough times for us to enrich our life, because, I think I love the analogy of life is like a mountain, and, the top of the mountain is God or goddess or whatever your faith is. Or it is, the end of your life, but it's like we all have our quest to try to get to that mountain. Some people's roads and ways will take them straight up. Some people will free climb up through cliff faces, and other times, you find yourself on a trail that you have to turn back around and take another path up. And, it's a real analogy for just our own lives that we are living in.
There's some people who will run away from the opportunity or like shut down. But someone said, I think it's in this article, they said, don't waste a good crisis. Like when you think about it, like this is a great opportunity. And every single crisis that we've been throughout time, there has been amazing things that have happened, like inspirational and innovation and creation that wouldn't have happened without it. So for me, I have to go to those places.
Yeah. What did I read the other day? That after the Spanish flu was the whole like Renaissance era, and it's like that this is the way things go. So yeah, we're in it trying to figure out, how best to handle everything in the day to day. And, I think that we have to learn to take these little wins. I think that especially as we're, established money-making adults, having to look at other ways to generate some revenue, it can be disappointing. But then to go and look at how innovating some new ideas, taking some of these thoughts that we've had and actualizing them will actually give you some inspiration and some positivity, and it'll distract you from some of the daunting, depressing things that we're facing, so it's, even if you're doing Zoom classes for haircuts and you're making 10 or 20 bucks off of it, it's still like, that's food for your family for the day. I similar situation too, of helping to sell some masks for a friend, where I was like, I wanted like these nice masks she was making. I asked her how much, and she wasn't really getting back to me. And then when she did, she was like, oh, I'm wholesaling them for 10 bucks. I'll give them to you for that price. And I'm like, I think they're worth 15 or 20. No problem. Let's put it out there to a few friends. And people were instantly like, oh yeah, I need more of those. It's like, we need to have, just like a pair of underwear, you got to have fresh, clean ones to wear every day would be best. So,
Yep. That makes sense.
and it's like, I don't make a bunch of money off, I'm not really doing it to make money, but then realizing like, hey, I just made 10 bucks selling a couple masks to people that needed them and wanted them. And, that's food for the day. So we have to like embrace these little wins, and to recognize too that you're doing something positive. So you're not sitting in your own headspace where those thoughts of anxiety are building up. So
yeah, I think there's
I know.
emotional momentum in doing something meaningful and helpful. So like you said, instead of sitting around, and also instead of thinking that we're having the kind of thinking like we did in the old world, I'm calling it the old world, before coronavirus. If we are really, embracing, like owning it and seeing it, and then using it with meaning, then there's an emotional momentum, I think, that happens, where a gratefulness of love. I know that sounds like cliche, but like actually pouring out love to the community, helping a friend, helping people, even if you're not making money from it, it leads to that emotional well-being. So even if you do something and you're making $5, it does something for you emotionally, which I think is really important for a family. Like, I know we have parents here that are watching this, and it is so important for us to lead. And the feeling that I think of it as the tone that we set in our family, especially in this crisis, is what our children feel. And if I was saying in a blog post or in a Facebook post, just staying calm is not enough. Like, that's what most people are trying to do. They're like, I'm just going to try to stay calm, but
That's what you do in the beginning. And we're through that now. It's like I think that, likewise, a lot of people are like, okay, no work, I think that a lot of people are drinking alcohol more and watching movies. And now you kind of get to that point where it's like, okay, we're putting on our quarantine 15. And now it's like, I can't hit the gym because the gyms are closed, but I need to start getting my exercise. And I feel like, once this quarantine thing kind of happened, I lost momentum in the exercise realm. And then, after a few weeks, I was recognizing, like, instead of watching the TV in the morning to get the news and the update about whether or not I can, try to go to my workshop, it was like, no, let's not turn the TV on. Let's not start our day that way. Let's do some breath exercises. Let's, do
awesome.
some sit-ups and push-ups. And, it definitely was, a few weeks there of not really getting the exercise the way we needed to, or the way I needed to, or was used to. So I think that, we have to get back into that routine. And, I think that there's a lot of people that stayed healthy and were able to like switch their routine and get some exercise and keep this positive mindset. But I think there's also a lot of people that are just like, okay, we just, we got a few weeks of this, let's just pass the time. I don't have to worry about driving, so let's drink some booze or, smoke some herb or whatever the deal may be. And then, a couple weeks goes by and you're like, you can't keep doing that. It's not really helping. And especially now that it's like they're pushing these dates back, that we really don't have the information to know when we're going to open it up. And, I feel like, what are we, 6 weeks into this national quarantine about that?
Yeah.
So I feel like, we've flattened the curve out a lot, and we're starting to get some more studies and more information in. so that, it's the time we need it, so it's really anybody's guess of how things are going to go. I notice here in Portland, I'm starting to see like a little coffee shop bakery is opened up again, and they've just
Oh,
got a line, where it's like only one in, one out, and they put, little 6 feet, little tags that say 6 feet out in front, and a line starts this way, and it's like, I think that what I anticipate seeing happening is more businesses starting to open up and starting to really have a pretty high level of social distancing and keeping space, and it's going to be like a new normal. We're going to have a new way of living life. I don't think it's going to just go back to the way that it was, at least um, until next season, or however long this goes on. We need to kind of come up with some creative ways to get things going and still be safe.
that's the thing about
So,
embracing it, is to like see it as the new normal, to see it as this is life for a while. This is what we're going to need to do.
mm-hmm,
So how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to help my family deal with this? And then another thing that you may or may not have heard of that will really motivate people, I think it's motivating me to get back in shape, is they found that there's a lot of a majority of the people, they of course they have the immune overreaction, but they did autopsies, and inside the lungs they've seen micro blood clotting, and that is the cause of many, many, many people dying, is this micro blood clotting. So they're saying people with cardiac problems and obesity are the ones who have more of that. And so
mm-hmm,
and so these blood clots are either filling their lungs or going into their brain. They're having aneurysms, even thrombosis, like in the legs, blood clots like getting stuck, and some people have to have their
yeah,
like legs amputated and things like that. So if we realize, it's not just old people, we need to actually, it's young people who are having these situations too. Not young, but 20s to 40s are having these situations with the blood clotting. And blood thinners are not doing it. That's not the cure. They've tried that, and that does not take care of it. They're actually giving people these blood thinners just like automatically, thinking like this is what we need to do now. But some people will bleed
mm-hmm,
too much, or some it won't even touch. So it's really an unknown right now. But if we get our cardio, our hearts in shape, and lose weight, which now today I just did like hundreds of jump ropes, like I'm doing 100 at a time jump roping, because I know
mm-hmm,
I need to get in shape. I need to get my cardio going. I did a Zumba class
yeah,
2 this week. I'm going to do another one tonight. And it's imperative, So like to get off the couch of like this was a short-term vacation mentality to
yeah,
like, what are we going to do now? I think this is where we are right now. What are we going to do now? We got to
mm-hmm,
take a hold of our lives in this brand new novel world that we're in, and like really own it and use it. That's
yeah. I've heard that that's actually been something with people that have the coronavirus. Even if they get sick, if you can try to like get some exercise, and is helpful. And I know people say when you're sick, you are just super weak, and you're not getting enough oxygen. But one of those realities is you start getting into your 40s, you realize like sleeping for 8 hours is kind of hard on my body, or like when you're sick and you're stuck in bed for 15 hours of the day, that causes pain and damage. So it's like really just trying to get up and get some activity, get the blood flowing is going to be helpful. But
yeah, with Mike.
we're just talking here. We're not professionals. So
Totally.
but I think we all know that trying to stay healthy, and that's one of the best things to help reduce stress and anxiety, is to get outside and get some exercise. And I know everybody's got different rules. I'm feeling so fortunate here in Portland that they have, encouraged exercise. And, just last week I rode my bike to work. And when I was riding home, there was probably twice as many people out cycling and running as there were cars on the road. And then
Wow.
we got this real nice false summer, as they call it here, in the 12 seasons of Portland, where it's just been really nice and sunny and starting to get into the 70s. And it was just a couple weeks of that here, but just, seeing people getting outside and everybody's yards and gardens look really good. And I think that's really the best thing you can try to do, is to get some exercise and to get reconnected to the earth. And hopefully everybody's able to do some of that.
Yeah, I'm starting to, notice that I need to actually organize what my kids do as far as like physical exercise, and monitor that. Not that I guess I didn't have to before when they were in school, because they always got exercise at school. So I just, it's like I can't always get them to go to, I can force them to go, I don't believe in forcing, but to the beach. I like to surf, but they don't always feel like surfing. So I just decided we're going to have like these intense races where there's an app that you can put on your phone that's like 20-minute intervals and then 10 rest. So it's like that intensity. I've heard like that intense kind of workout it doesn't have to be long. You don't have to do it for a long time, but that intensity gets your heart rate up, and that's what you need for your heart. So they had fun doing it. It was like, a competition. Let's run around the house and try to touch the pole. Like whoever can touch the pole the quickest. We'll see what your time is. You can try to do better than the last time. And so if you gamify stuff, I think it's helpful for kids. Especially mine are in grade school. So they need a little incentive. They need something. And I was telling the teacher, my oldest one's teacher, that causing ritualized fun, I think, is really important. In their class, they're a Waldorf school, so they're just learning how to navigate this online thing. And they have them sitting for a time and then a break and then sitting for a time. But it's sort of like this, wah, 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 like the Peanuts lecturing. And I said, can we just like insert some fun, like a little like ritualized fun here and there? And Cam came up with this, my older one came up with an idea that he heard of. It's called Cahoots. It's like a teacher-led game that all the kids try to guess a certain thing, and there's winners. So it's like just gamifying stuff. We have to do things differently these days, and be creative. So that's kind of what, just another part of my world I'm dealing with is looking at the well-being of my children. I can't do what we did before. Nothing, is the same. So it takes a lot of thinking, and it's a little stressful. So I've been actually really stressed in like this transitional of that vacation, relaxed, okay, this is going to go away in a while kind of mentality, like you were saying. And then now owning it, embracing it, like seeing it fully real, and feeling the Groundhog Day feeling like, no, I can't do that anymore. I've got to like do something. And so I think today,
how are things going?
What?
How are things going with Aaron, and just kind of talking about that like dynamic between husband and wife, where you're both, I'm sure, feeling the financial stress and the kids. How's that working? How are things going with him?
It's good. Now that we're home all the time, he does have a little bit of work, but we check in with each other. It's like we find ourselves talking about things, and as this goes on, from moment to moment, our emotional like landscape changes within ourselves. I mean, like from moment. So what I said yesterday might be totally different, or what I said in a couple hours ago might be totally different from what I'm feeling right now. So luckily we're home, and at different times we can sense each other's mode of where we're at. And I can see we both were sort of getting worn down. He talked about the Groundhog Day too, and even though he's getting a lot of work done outside, like he's not a sit down kind of person. He's like I'm going to be productive with this time. I have time. I'm going to do all these projects, and he's getting a lot done. But that's even wearing on him too. It's like, so I there's so many layers, I think, of stress that I see him addressing. Like this is just him. He has these compartments of stress. He's like, okay, I'm going to deal with that one, then I'm going to deal with this one, and then I'm going to deal with that one. And he's a man, so he's very internal about it. At least he's that kind of man who's very internal about it. And when he comes to a realization and a solution, then he'll talk about it. So I get to hear the after the fact process. In the mid process, I don't hear about it. When there's some ambivalence or unknown, or he might throw out a little like, I'm wondering about that, but I don't hear a lot about it. I might hear like one line, like an inkling of like a concern. So but I see that we're on the same pace, like if you're looking at the emotional escalation, like if that were the bell curve, we're like, we've gone at the same pace, and we've come to it like this escalation in a sense of, okay, like financially, okay, this is like not relieving itself. So, and I can hear that in his voice. And so that's what another part of my stress was. And like, I really have to do something. And that's where I came up with this hair cutting thing. I used to do hair, and I have a mastermind group of guys that I kind of checked it out with. I'm like, what do you think about this, guys? And they liked it. And they were like, yeah, that's great. Definitely everybody could use it. So, so that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that in general, like something I'm kind of gathering from you and is just something for people to use, is to just kind of like recognize when your partner is in one of those spaces of intense stress or intensity as they change, and to recognize that like as much as we want to help them sometimes, giving them space to process on their own, or just recognizing it doesn't really matter. Like when you see your partner's really struggling emotionally, that you might not be able to do anything about it, and so that sometimes just trying to offer to help or checking in when somebody's under one of those spaces can really create a more confrontational moment, so I think that being able to learn to give people space even though you want to help them, or I was talking to somebody and they said, my partner will just put on this hat. So when she's got that hat on, I know, just don't say anything. No good morning, no hi, and just to recognize that oftentimes, when we find ourselves in a reactionary space, things can escalate, and conflicts and emotions can get escalated quickly. And sometimes just kind of giving them a space is going to be the best thing to do, open to either one, but it seems like, you guys seem to be working well together, and to recognize like, okay, sometimes the best thing you can do to help somebody isn't to go and talk or ask them what they're feeling or what's going on. It's to say, let me go and get involved in something. Let me go and work on this project for myself. And sometimes that's the best thing to do. So
I think that
kind of wanting to touch on some of our family dynamics and just the modern family, the way things are changing, especially if both people are in the house together all day.
Definitely. Yeah, one of the things that I think that I can do for him, because I knew that he was going through that processing of stress and kind of working things out, was not talking about it necessarily, but giving him support in nurturing. So like bringing him lemonade when he's outside, and like going, look at what you're doing. That is really cool. And like, I see how you're putting that together. and being interested in that so that he feels a support. And then, he was asking me about my new venture that I'm doing, and then he helped me to do a photo shoot. And so it's not like triggering, because if you ask pinpointed questions of too direct, sometimes you get because you feel like you have to answer them like it's your parent or something, so it triggers that. And so instead, coming from the side or underneath and like giving that support that you could give in a nurturing way, like just, rubbing his head or a back rub, or, it's like, it's just, we need different ways of support when they're processing. And to know your partner's there loving you is tremendous,
No, I think that I didn't know where this was going, but I wanted to just reach out. And I think that that's, no surprise that you're going to say using a nurturing and a feminine way. And it's so true. It's like sometimes when you're working on a problem in your head and it's like you don't see the obvious solution because we're in this predicament that we don't have control over, even somebody asking and verbalizing can just intensify it, and then you're pushing away this person who's trying to help, and then you feel rejected. And I think that, that simple solution is like, instead of asking what you can do, just find something simple. Your partner. And so it's like, what can you do? Make them some tea, just try to give them, you don't have to say, what are you thinking about? What's going on? I can tell you're stressed. It's like, all of those things can just escalate the emotion.
Sometimes it's better to hand them the sandwich and walk away. Just hand them the sandwich, don't say a word, walk away. Come back out with lemonade, smile, and walk away. Because you can tell when they're in it. And they don't... Talking brings it up to the wrong place, especially for men. So women, if you're listening, talking is not a way for them to process at certain times. So it's like, hand them the sandwich. Just say, hi, love you.
It kind of makes me think too about how, on the flip side, women like to talk about their feelings and their conflicts, and they don't want to be presented with solutions or have somebody show them how things could have gone differently. I think a lot of men, if you didn't know, a little reminder that it's like women want to talk about things and they just want you to listen. And it's like getting it off their chest and talking about it is all they want. They don't want to have their problem solved. They don't want to have the grass is greener. It's like just letting them decompress and blow off some of the steam verbally, and try not to have any attachment to it, and just try not to react to it. I think that that's one of those things that it's really easy to get reactionary.
Totally.
I think something I experienced in my relationship when we were still in it was the complaining back and forth. I would hear my partner complain about, how she felt physically or some scenario, and it was challenging to, sorry, I just had a little phone call I had to block out there.
Oh, thank you.
I found myself wanting to complain too, because I would hear her complaining, and it was like, I felt like complaining would make me feel more relatable, or like we could relate into this. And, ultimately it wasn't really helping the situation at all. And I needed to just kind of learn to accept that,
when women complain or when they need to talk, it's like the way women's brains process is like what they used to do in tribes. And so it's like once it leaves their mouth, the actual idea, it helps them to see it like in front of them. It's really weird. It's like when it's inside in here, you can't get out of that little box that you're in. But for some reason,
I'm doing a podcast, man.
Once it leaves your mouth, you almost don't need any input. It's almost like you are able to process that thought because it's out there and it's like in front of you. It's a really weird phenomenon. I experienced it as a woman. I'm like, I find myself saying things, I'm like, and to my friends where they're like, and they don't even like give you anything. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. but it's just the act of getting it out there. And then it's sort of like, oh, now that it's out there, I can see this other possibility and this other possibility. It's a weird brain thing. It's there. And I can process inside a lot, but there's especially the really emotional stuff, it sort of needs to be said. And once you say it and you cry it out, it's like once you cry, then you can actually think. It's really weird for a woman.
Yeah.
So that, men and women are different. And for a woman to expect a man to understand how she's processing is not fair unless she explains it to him. Unless she says, here's what I need from you.
I'm so glad you just shared that, because it's just like one of those things. It doesn't make sense to a man that that's the way that your process works. It's not, whether it's male or female, I think just understanding that difference is not going to come to my mind, and as a man, you're sitting here with, your partner, and they're spilling their guts and they're getting emotional and they might have frustrations with you, and to have them cry, you're like, did I do something wrong or whatever? But you're like, no, it's part of this cathartic release, and so yeah, thanks for sharing that a little bit.
The only reason why I know the
that's
differences between men and women's brains is because I used to produce health shows and for Discovery and Lifetime Television and for NBC News. And so I've done a lot of research on brains, and I've done a lot of research for different shows that I've done to see the differences. And if you look at evolutionary biology, you can see that it really does follow the way our brains are as men and women. There might be anomalies. I'm not saying that there aren't. But in general, this is the way it is. We process differently. And women don't know that, and men don't know that. And so because today women are not in tribes with other women and men are not with other men in tribes, we expect this immediate family to fulfill all these needs. So we look to our partner like, you're supposed to do all those things the tribe did. But that's not what they're thinking. They just need it. So they don't know. They don't know that that's happening. And the men are like, huh? Like, really? Like, you want me to, like, and they try to problem solve and figure it out. So that's just the cycle. And it needs to be spelled out because we're living in a different time, but no one is helping people, men and women, to understand this. So it needs to be explained. I don't know why people are not. Well, here we are. We are explaining it right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. And I think, something we've touched on in the past is how the compartmentalization of families has really taken us out of this tribal lifestyle that is really where our instincts teach us how to live. So, we get these little houses and, we get these little families, and we're all kind of our little family units, and you don't have as much when you have kids. Not everyone has family in the same town or the same state. So it's like, people, I think there's a lot of pressure on relationships and families in this current day and age. And especially for the men to help take care of the children and to help with the raising and the changing the diapers and the cooking, the cleaning. And like, I'm one of these modern fathers that would do all of this, and I wasn't feeling appreciated or like wasn't recognized. It was like, this is what you expected me to do, and I'm still expected to provide, the primary source of income for the family. And we've lost touch with this community and this tribal community. And now that we're under quarantine and we're looking at what the new landscape is going to be like, we're very compartmentalized. It's like we want to limit the amount of time limit the number of people that we interact with, limit the number of other kids our kids interact with, just to keep our exposure low and minimized. So I think that we're going to have an increasing number of issues coming up if we don't start talking about this, and how to talk through these roles and figure out ways to handle it, whether it's staying just a tight family unit and diversifying the responsibility and the appreciation. I think that's one of the things that it's like, I don't mind I enjoy caring for my children and I enjoy cooking and cleaning and doing these domestic things. I just want to be appreciated for them. And I want to, even if I don't clean as good as my partner does, I still want to be appreciated for the effort, and to go and like recognize that like when you're sharing roles in a household, that you shouldn't expect your partner to do things to the exact same standard that you might do them, because you're different people and you're going to have different priorities or ways of doing things. But to really just try to like give respect and appreciation for the effort.
What women don't understand is that if you want a man to do the cleaning or some specific thing in a certain way, you have to spell it out. And most of the time, they're fully willing to do it in whatever way you would like, if it's reasonable. And so, it's sort of like with children, if you give them, here's the rules, here's the expectations, and once that's done, then I will feel like it's really clean. And otherwise,
Yeah.
I'll have to go in and clean again, and that frustrates me. So I think if your partner knows that, then they're fully willing to do those things if it's not if it's not unreasonable.
Yeah.
But
And I
instead, a
think
lot of
something I
women
want to
just,
just
let me just one thing. A lot of women just think that a man should know automatically. And just by her frustration level, he should get that she wants it done a certain way. So that
yeah.
is how we need to
I
realize
think
we need to
I think
communicate that.
something to touch on there is we have to learn to be good teachers and how to be good teachers, and a big part of that is reading the student. Whether it's your partner or your child, you need to really kind of not have too much control over the situation, not try to control, and to really like look and learn the nuances. One of the things I really wanted to say is that don't ever criticize a man's job of cleaning. If he cleaned up, give him recognition and credit for them doing the job, and appreciate it, even if there's still crumbs on the floor and you didn't like the way that they didn't do it the way you wanted. In that moment, you have to reward them, and then you can also go and try to teach them how it is, and to be able to kind of like, hey, you know see how I'm cleaning up and I'm getting all these crumbs and stuff, because it's like we want to do things right. Whether it's male or female, we want to. We don't want to be criticized for how we've done things, but we want to learn like, oh, here's how I can do a better job of this. And if you're able to teach in a nuanced way, then you're going to have a much better relationship, and that's going to
Yeah,
grow.
I think it
But
comes from.
trying
Oh, sorry. I think
just trying to control and be that hard teacher is going to make it more frustrating, and ultimately we don't want to create frustration in our students.
Yeah, I think that it's frustrating when somebody does come in and criticize and doesn't acknowledge, and in a different mode, the same result can be accomplished if you come at it in a helpful way, where you go, this is amazing that you are like stepping up and doing all these things that I've asked you, and I see how you are putting all this effort into it. You could actually put in less effort by doing it this way. I want to help you so that it's actually easier for you. So when you look at the person that that's doing this, instead of looking at like what's lacking, I think there's sort of this analogy to life. Instead of what's lacking, assume that they're doing things in the best way they can. And if it were a child, if you assume that they just don't know better, that let me just show you and I'll make it so much easier on you. If like a kid is like coloring and trying to get into the lines and they only know how to go like this, but they don't know how to hold it like this, then you go, let me just take your hand and put the crayon here and let's just like see how you can do more refined movement. And the child will be like, thank you. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing men to children like men are children, but we all are children in a sense,
Yes. I think that a lot of it has to do with expectations too, and I can see the scenario of the husband cleaning the kitchen, and he's wanting to, do this for his partner, his wife, and he doesn't do a very good job or doesn't do it to the same level. And so the wife will go in and, be anger scrubbing and getting things buffed out, and doing these, microaggressions. And it's because of that like level of expectation there. Whereas like when you have your kids clean the kitchen, you don't go and say, you didn't do this right. You don't go around and grade them on it. You just go in and clean the kitchen afterwards, and you don't make a big deal out of it, and you recognize, like with children, like they're going to get better and better the older they get, and it's just getting that habit formed, and not having the frustration and the microaggressions to build up resentment, because it's like that's something that I think a lot of people are probably dealing with, is this buildup of microaggressions when they're just a family compounded into a household, and they're used to being able to all get out and have different experiences, and now they're stuck in quarantine.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of this situation when I was a television reporter in a very small market, and the new photographers, the new cameramen that would come in, they came in off the street. Like they knew practically nothing. Maybe they owned a camera, maybe they owned like a home video camera, but the woman who was in charge of them, she was like the manager of all of them. She would always say, well, you should know that already. And it would make them feel like embarrassed, and shameful, and like, should I know that? Like question themselves. It lowered their confidence, and she wasn't training them. And so it's almost like the same thing. Yeah. Like if you just see them as like, they're wonderful. They're so willing. They're here to do the job. All they want is training. All they need is training. They're like so open to it. But if you come out with them like, well, who are you? What are you doing? Like that they're terrible already. You're almost labeling them with your whole expression, and there's all that shame and all these other emotions come up that are so unnecessary. And so I see that in men-women relationships where it's like the woman almost always thinks that she's right in the way, her method of doing things, because women have this particular way that they do things. And I may have talked about this before, but men have a different way, and it fully works in their system of doing things. So if we just let that system play out, sometimes women will discover that the man's system works for his way of doing things. So, but if it's within the household and it's too irritating, then just a little training, like without the microaggressions, as you call it. That's like the perfect way to put it.
Yeah. No, I think that it has to do with, not having a high expectation and appreciating what is happening, because it's really easy to be judgmental. And of course your partner, you're going to just expect them to be on the same level as you with domestic things, which isn't always the case. But, I think really coming at things with love and compassion is the way that you're going to keep your family together and keep your household vibe in a positive space when we have all these uncontrolled difficulties that we're facing with here, especially as the stress builds with finances. And I'm sure something that's a dynamic a lot of people are facing is maybe one of the partners does still get to go to work. So it's like, that situation that, I think was a lot of the frustration in my relationship with the kids, is that, my partner saw me leave the house to go to work, and they just assumed that that I was having fun, or that I got a different experience, or that they were feeling trapped in the house. And to recognize like there's all sorts of stresses that come with leaving the house, and it doesn't mean it's any different, so we got to like come up with tools to be like, no, it's okay, and work through that.
Here's one
feeling of go ahead.
You can finish that thought if you want. I was just going to offer a tool, but so go ahead if you want.
Give me the tool.
Okay. So
it was this feeling of anxiety,
So You know, as you said, we're in these small spaces in our homes with our partners now, sometimes 24/7, or the other partner gets to leave, and there's this like assumption that it's so much better, the grass is greener. The other way to do it is to use this tool that this psychologist calls generous of heart, being generous of heart. And that is assuming the other person, assuming goodwill. So, like, assume that the other person is motivated by goodwill and that whatever they're doing is for the team, that they are doing it in a caring way, and whatever they're doing, even if you think, oh, it could be like this horrible thing that they're doing on their own and they're not thinking about me, that assume that, like, stop that thought and think, well, maybe there's another thing going on where it actually is a generous act, and assume that there's goodness behind their actions. And if you both do that, it opens the door for that assumption to build into, like, oh, I see that, there's no criticism here, and that I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm going to tell you why I did it, and it actually probably was for good. And so there's not the automatic assumption of something bad or criticism. And it just wipes out a whole layer that really doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, no, and I see, just kind of reflecting to that story with the film, the cameramen and the film producers, is it's like when you feel somebody's being really critical of you and you do make a mistake or you do waste some time or something like that happens, you're going to consider the option of trying to cover it up the mistake or to lie about it, where it's like, and then you're creating deception, and that's going to undermine your relationship as well. So it's like, recognizing, like, it's being critical that is creating the problem that's building up to it, so it's like, if you're not being so judgmental, you're not being critical of mistakes or errors, and then you're not going to end up with the potential for deception.
That's, yeah, that it's interesting how one thing will lead to another, will lead to another, and none of it had to happen.
Yeah. If you were just honest and not judgmental, then, and I think that's a really important part I think I can see in your relationship, that is probably why you guys are able to do really well.
Well, I just want to be clear, like, we're human beings. And so we have our initial first reaction. Fear is a first reaction, and assumption of that fear comes into play. But what happens is, the third thing that we do that's different from other people is that we step back from that fear and assumption and go, hold on, there's probably something good happening here. And so that third step is the difference. If we kept on that track of fear and, whatever false assumption that we're not sure of is actually true, then that's where you act upon something that maybe is not even true. But to step back, and that's how we create peace in our relationship. And it's not perfect. Our relationship is not perfect because we're human. But then we realize we're both human. And we've talked about that. We're like, okay, a lot of times I'll say, okay, I was really grouchy like an hour ago, and I'm sorry I said that. Like, and he's like, oh, I didn't even notice that you said something. And I'm like, well, I just want to let you know I was grouchy, and that's where that was coming from, and
how did that make you feel when you say that? It's like, I can relate. I'm one that likes to admit when I, am in a bad mood or whatever, and apologize for those things. And I think that, oftentimes you're saying it to alleviate some stress or dynamic in the relationship with your partner, But then there's also something about like, I feel human when I can say that, when I can own that God, I totally just reacted, or I was in my head about something else and it came out negatively to you. And that's, I think a really important part of the process of, being a good human is to admit, when you admit it to your partner, you're coming to peace with it within yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes he doesn't even notice because he's assuming goodwill. Like it's sort of like
Yeah.
you build this muscle when you continue to assume goodwill, that it's almost like part of the landscape of our relationship. But then there's those times where also we're human and we get triggered. I believe we marry people who will trigger us. That's what I've heard. And so, there's that too, like embracing that and saying, okay, yeah, I see you're triggered. I see I'm triggered. And, like smiling, and the smile is the step back, is that take a step back perspective. Like, I see the dynamic happening here. It's not actually a personal attack. It actually is the human dynamic of fear, and then once you can step back out of it, and I look at him in a certain way and smile at him in a certain way, or he does the same to me, then we'll go, okay, this is what's going on. It's not about the actual thing that's being said or the situation. There's a trigger here, and that's the best scenario. Sometimes we get triggered,
We are human.
And then we go down that road of like talking ourselves out of the trigger, So that's the dynamic that happens. But when we're in these really tight quarters under lockdown, and the idea of lockdown, it just heightens everything, So I think that's what a lot of us are feeling, and it's intensifying things, But as we started the show to say, like, when we have these opportunities, we don't waste a crisis. Like, we can actually learn how to, hello, I can see you. I totally can see you crawling in. That was hilarious. Thank you for trying to sneak in and not disturb. This is a show, but you know what? It's a totally casual. It is what it is. Live is like that.
I think that's a perfectly good example of just how human we really are. I love that I couldn't tell which one of you boys it was going to be sneaking on the bottom. I did not guess it was Aaron at first. So that's great.
I didn't either. Well, I don't know.
Well, I think we're kind of at our Zoom time.
What's that?
I said I think we're at our Zoom allotted time there.
I think we are, and I think we've covered a lot of really interesting things about this time that we're in. Hopefully, it's helpful to whomever decides to watch it. It's a long one, but we're all sitting at home, so why not?
Yeah. No, it's good.
All right, so
I really appreciate you, Ange.
What was that?
I really appreciate you, Ange.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate too. We're lucky to have each other and that we're related by marriage. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, do you have any other final thoughts?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, this show is sponsored by Chew on This Media and Visualize Unlimited LLC, and it is conversations for men that women need to hear. I'm Angeline Chew Longshore. And
I'm Zelis Daniel.
All right. See you next week.